Greetings everyone, my name is Max, and I'd want to share with you another tragic tale today. Due to her father's work, Kristen Rossum's family traveled frequently. Thus, she spent her early years growing up in Virginia and California. She was born in Tennessee on October 25, 1975. Kristen had two siblings and attended an all-girls boarding school in her early teens. By the time she was 17, she had taken up smoking cigarettes and drinking beer. Kristen started taking methamphetamine around 1992. She had attended a university in 1994 in an effort to stop using illegal narcotics, but she had dropped school and moved to San Diego following a relapse. When she met Gregory de Villers in 1995, her life took a completely different turn. She seemed to have overcome her problems with illegal substances and was headed toward becoming a mother. Following her 1998 honors graduation from San Diego State University, Kristen and Gregory were married in 1999. She went on to become a toxicologist and worked in the office of the city's medical examiner. It appeared that Kristen had effectively turned her life around and was on a favorable trajectory, despite some initial hurdles. But not everything has a pleasant conclusion. Around 9:22 p.m. on November 6, 2000, a Monday, a 25-year-old lady named Kristen Rossum called 911 in distress from her home in the United States in San Diego, California. She said over the phone that her husband, Gregory de Villers, 26, had supposedly taken his own life and was not breathing. The 911 dispatcher told Kristen to start CPR, but sadly, Gregory was declared dead after her efforts and the arrival of paramedics and police. Gregory and Kristen had just been married for 17 months, which was a comparatively short time. As per Kristen's statement to the police, Gregory seemed a little sleepy that night, which she attributed to the effects of her cold medication. Kristen went on to say that after taking a bath, she came downstairs to find Gregory unconscious on the bed. Gregory was found on the bedroom floor among strewn rose petals, a scene that puzzled the authorities. His pillow had a wedding picture next to it, and there were rumpled pages from Kristen's diary all over the place. Kristen stated that in order to administer CPR, she had moved Gregory to the ground. The peculiarities of the circumstance led the police to compare it to a scene from the movie American Beauty. Kristen told the paramedics that her husband Gregory had not taken any medications when they initially arrived. She then retracted her claim, though, and said that it's possible he swallowed some oxycodone. When they got to the hospital, Kristen told a nurse she thought Gregory could have taken too much oxycodone. During their investigation, the authorities looked into the possibility that Gregory's death was caused by an unintentional overdose of oxycodone and cold medicine. They discovered that Gregory was upset throughout their conversations with Kristen, suggesting that their marriage might be in trouble. Because of this, Kristen originally suggested to the authorities that he had committed suicide, a line of inquiry they also followed. The rose petals that were all over Gregory's body, according to Kristen, were left over from a bouquet he had given her for her birthday on October 25th. She thought that using these petals, of which there was only one surviving rose, represented the dissolution of their marriage. Gregory's family had doubts about the suicide theory, as did others present the night his body was found. A pivotal moment in the inquiry happened on November 8th, when Russ Lowe, one of Kristen's co-workers, called the police. By disclosing that Kristen was having an adulterous affair with her manager, he changed the course of the police investigation. Gregory met her for the first time in 1995, and the two eventually got married in 1999. With Gregory's help, Kristen, who had previously struggled with methamphetamine misuse, changed her life and received the highest honors in biochemistry. In March 2000, she was hired by the San Diego County Office of the Medical Examiner, OM, as a toxicologist. Gregory, meanwhile, went after a job in the biotech sector. Not long after Kristen started working at the OM, Australian Michael Robertson took over as the forensic laboratory manager in place of Russ Lowe. Russ has worked for the OM for a long time as the acting laboratory manager. Tension in the laboratory resulted from the choice to give Michael the permanent position rather than Russ. When the staff learned that Kristen and Michael, who were both married, were having an illicit affair, the already tense situation worsened. Some staff members became concerned that Kristen might receive special treatment. A few months following these disclosures, in October 2000, Kristen took methamphetamine again. According to police investigations, Gregory confronted Kristen on November 2, 2000, just 4 days before he was found dead, about her usage of illegal substances and his suspicions about her affair. Gregory demanded that she leave the Y and threatened to tell her employer about her illicit substance usage and affair if she didn't comply. Toxicology tests were part of the autopsy that was performed after Gregory passed away. The medical examiner, Dr. Blackburn, concluded that acute fentanyl intoxication was the cause of Gregory's death. Gregory's post-mortem specimens showed very high levels of fentanyl, trace levels of oxycodone, and lower amounts of clonazepam, according to toxicology data. Kristen denied knowing the source of the fentanyl when questioned, but the cops knew that Kristen had access to fentanyl because she worked as a toxicologist. According to police theories, Kristen may have given Gregory fentanyl covertly, which resulted in his poisoning. Based on the toxicological and medical evidence, they built a case, and after that, Kristen was charged with first-degree murder, to which she entered a not guilty plea. Ralph Rossum and Claremont McKenna, Kristen's parents, went to considerable measures throughout the trial to obtain her $1.25 million bail by mortgaging their home. But because of their financial commitment, they were unable to hire a private attorney. As a result, the court assigned Kristen's case to a public defender. According to the prosecution, Kristen killed Gregory because he might reveal to her employer that she had an affair with Michael Robertson and used illegal narcotics. The prosecution claims that Kristen used fentanyl, a strong synthetic opiate that is 80 times more potent than morphine, to poison Gregory. They speculated that she might have tried to hurt him with clonazepam at first, but then switched to fentanyl after it didn't work. In addition, the prosecution stated that Kristen prepared the bedroom to seem a suicide by shredding pages from her journal and placing flowers and a wedding picture in strategic locations around Gregory's body. The court was informed that Kristen, who graduated with a degree in biochemistry, reportedly used her understanding of science and illegal substances to carry out the poisoning. Kristen attempted to convince her co-workers at the medical examiner's office, where she was employed, that Gregory's death was a suicide, according to the prosecution. It was customary for the medical examiner's office to ascertain the cause of death in rare situations, but owing to a conflict of interest, the case was moved to another laboratory for the toxicological tests. The prosecution gave the jurors a rundown of Kristen's actions on November 6th. She went to work in the morning after notifying Gregory's employer of his absence. Her co-workers reported that she was seen sobbing in Michael's office approximately 1 hour after she arrived at work at 9 a.m. According to the testimony of the apartment complex manager where Kristen and Gregory lived, she returned home at 12:10 p.m. and was observed hurrying inside. She went to the neighborhood grocery store later at 12:41 p.m. and made a few purchases. She called Michael several times in the hours before Gregory died. Gregory's body was found to be covered in rose petals, which Kristen identified as coming from the last surviving rose in the bouquet he had given her for her birthday. But the day Gregory died, Kristen bought a solitary rose, according to a receipt that the police found. The facts surrounding Gregory's death and the high fentanyl levels found in the testing samples were presented to the court. Gregory had been dead for at least an hour when the paramedics arrived. According to testimony from Dr. Brian Blackburn, the San Diego County medical examiner who performed Gregory's autopsy. Gregory, according to Dr. Blackburn's testimony to the court, had early bronchopneumonia, a condition that develops when breathing shallowly or unconsciousness prevents the body's natural breathing mechanisms from clearing accumulated secretions in the lungs. Dr. Blackburn also revealed that there was a substantial volume of pee in Gregory's bladder. Gregory would have felt uncomfortable in this state if he had been conscious. Thus, Dr. Blackburn came to the conclusion that Gregory had not been breathing properly for about 6 to 12 hours before he passed away. In his evidence, Dr. Blackburn made it clear that the quantity of clonazepam found in Gregory's blood did not constitute an overdose and was considered non-fatal according to medical standards. The medical examiner's office was told to not include fentanyl in normal tests because it was rare to find the drug there, especially at such high amounts. But because of a conflict of interest, Pacific Toxicology received the samples and used them to perform specialized fentanyl testing. Dr. Theodore Stanley testified on behalf of the prosecution. While fentanyl is a strong and quick-acting analgesic, Dr. Stanley also highlighted one of the drug's major negative effects. It can cause respiratory failure, which would make a person cease breathing. According to Dr. Stanley's testimony, the rate at which fentanyl becomes effective, depending on how it is given, the maximum effect happens 16 hours after a transdermal patch is applied, 20 to 30 minutes after swallowing, 15 to 20 minutes after an intramuscular injection, and 5 minutes after an intravenous injection. Dr. Stanley told the court that fentanyl is normally not taken orally because only about 35% of it makes it into the bloodstream due to the liver's destruction of about 65% of it. However, neither Dr. Stanley nor Dr. Blackburn could provide a conclusive response when asked how fentanyl entered Gregory's body. Dr. Stanley hypothesized that Gregory may have had fentanyl injections more than once, given the fluctuating concentration levels in his blood, and the evidence of his prolonged unconsciousness and shallow breathing prior to his death. The prosecution offered evidence that Kristen might have put fentanyl patches on Gregory's arm while he was sleeping, even though they were unable to provide a clear explanation for how she poisoned him. The court was informed that the medical examiner's office audited its drug standards and impounded medication inventory after learning of fentanyl use and Gregory's death. 10 milligrams of fentanyl standard and 15 fentanyl patches had vanished, according to this audit. The audit also revealed that Kristen had participated in all 3 of the incidents in which the missing fentanyl patches had been seized and had logged in the fentanyl standard. Additionally, the medical examiner's office found that there were unaccounted for amounts of methamphetamine, clonazepam, and OxyContin, a time-released version of oxycodone. Although the defense acknowledged that fentanyl contributed to Gregory's death, they maintained that Kristen was innocent and that Gregory killed himself because he was depressed about his marital issues. Kristen testified in her own defense during the trial. She reported to the court that Gregory seemed confused when she awoke on November 6th. She called his workplace at 7:42 a.m. to let them know he was sick and wouldn't be working. Kristen said she left for work, but came home later to see how Gregory was doing. After lunchtime, they have lunch together. In her testimony, Kristen said that when she asked Gregory about his prior condition, he acknowledged that he had taken some of her oxycodone and clonazepam. He went back to bed after lunch and she went back to work. She left her job around 2:30 p.m., went back to the apartment, saw Michael, and then went back there at approximately 5 p.m. At 6:30 p.m., she left once more for running errands. According to Kristen, she got back at 8 p.m. and had a bath. According to Kristen's testimony, she went into the bath thinking Gregory was asleep and realized he wasn't breathing when she got out. That's when she made her 911 call. The prosecutor characterized Kristen's account as odd during cross-examination. She acknowledged having lied in the past, especially regarding using illegal narcotics. The prosecutor highlighted that fentanyl was an ideal poison since it was hard to detect, something Kristen, who worked with these kinds of poisons, knew all too well. The defense contended that oxycodone and clonazepam may work in concert to increase their potency, even though Dr. Blackburn's testimony indicated that the amounts of clonazepam in Gregory's blood were not lethal. This theory, however, did not solve the puzzle of how and why there were such high concentrations of fentanyl and how it was consumed. Kristen was found guilty of first-degree murder and murder by special circumstances owing to the use of poison after an 8-hour deliberation by the jury. After that, she was given a life sentence without the chance of release. When Kristen challenged her conviction, it became clear that her own defense team had made mistakes during the appeals court process. Her attorneys recognized that fentanyl was the cause of death, but they did not ask for the autopsy samples to be tested for metabolites of fentanyl. This test might have determined whether or not Gregory had truly consumed fentanyl, or whether the drug's presence in the samples was due to contamination in the lab following Gregory's passing. Gregory's death from fentanyl would have been refuted if the drug had only ever been detected in the samples and had never been present in his body. It is unclear how fentanyl could be contained solely in the samples, and if the medical examiner's office forwarded the samples to another lab for analysis, could there be any chance of laboratory contamination? The appeals court was informed that there was a lapse in the samples line of evidence. The samples that were identified as specimens taken from Gregory's corpse were put inside an open cardboard box. The plan was to take the specimen right away to the sheriff's office and then take it to another laboratory. Nevertheless, because the intended beneficiary wasn't present at the sheriff's office, the medical examiner's office was where the box with the samples was kept. After about 36 hours, it was finally taken to the sheriff's crime lab. The main contention made to the appeals court was that, at the time the samples were kept in the OM, anyone who had a key to the building might have been able to access them. This raised doubt on the idea that fentanyl was the cause of Gregory's death by raising the possibility that the drug may have been added to the samples after his death. Referring to the interpersonal ties and conflicts among the OM staff, Kristen said that there may have been a reason to tamper with the samples and frame her for murder. Kristen provided evidence for this claim by citing an event that occurred on November 8, 2000, in which Michael, one of the people associated with the OM, allegedly told an OM toxicologist that he had tested a sample of Gregory's stomach contents. The 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals panel of 3 judges found that Kristen's trial attorneys erred in failing to refute the prosecution's claim that her husband overdosed on fentanyl. They claimed that rather than accepting the prosecution's story, her defense team ought to have tested the autopsy samples for fentanyl metabolites. They referred the case back to federal court for a hearing to determine whether this defense mistake could have affected the outcome of the trial, but they did not overturn the conviction. However, the appeals court panel decided not to hold the hearing in Kristen's case after a subsequent ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, emphasizing federal court deference to state court rulings in such issues. Her appeal was thus turned down, and she is still incarcerated. After Kristen's trial, Michael Robertson, who was named as a co-conspirator, returned to Australia and started a forensics consulting business. How do you feel about this narrative? Post your thoughts in the comments section. We appreciate you being here and for watching. Look after your loved ones and yourself.